soldiers, we stand at our crossroad, where our units all curse to victory. Do not fall now! Us, the enemies of us, we have faust! Move out the gates to begin them!
War is remembered in clean lines, heroes and villains, victory and defeat, right and wrong. But real war lives in the margins, in rooms with locked doors, in decisions made when no one is watching. Some moments never make it into official histories, not because they were insignificant, but because they were too dangerous to acknowledge. In the winter of 1945, as Europe froze and the outcome of the Second World War tilted toward inevitability, one such moment unfolded behind stone walls in Luxembourg. A single choice, made in silence, beside a roaring fire, would erase a crime, protect an army's reputation, and seal a secret that would remain buried for 70 years. This is not a story about battlefield glory. This is a story about what happens when justice collides with survival, and why one of America's most legendary generals chose fire over truth.
So that's that misnast and frightful! Right, treat the Jews, the Microwans! Soldiers, hold your grounds! The enemy is down, 16! Flank the high ground, fight forwards! For that gate!
January 4th, 1945. Luxembourg lay locked in ice. Inside a drafty chateau repurposed as headquarters for the United States Third Army, General George S. Patton faced a decision that would never appear in a communique, never be debated in a courtroom, and never be spoken aloud. Yet that decision would shield an American war crime from history for 7 decades. Had Patton chosen differently, the consequences would have been catastrophic. American soldiers would have faced gallows. Nazi propaganda would have feasted, screaming to the world that the United States was no better than the SS. And the reputation of Patton himself, arguably the most feared and effective combat commander America ever produced, would have been shattered beyond repair. The man they called Old Blood and Guts had discovered that his own troops had executed 50 captured SS prisoners. What he did next was not written into doctrine.
Do not stop pushing forward with everything! Follow me! We take that position! Hey soldiers, this is our idea! We move down to Angel! Victory awaits!
It was not lawful, and it would define his legacy in silence. Patton had earned his nickname the hard way, by leading from the front, pistols gleaming, while other generals issued orders from maps and tents. He was a soldier philosopher, a brutal romantic who believed war was humanity's truest test, that violence properly applied revealed destiny. By January 1945, he had proven his creed. His Third Army had ripped across France, crushed German strongholds at Metz, and, against all odds, pivoted north to relieve Bastogne during the darkest hours of the Battle of the Bulge. But on this morning, his headquarters was cold. The radiators were dead. The only warmth came from a stone fireplace where logs snapped and hissed.
Soldier dance, take that now! Force forward, I do not go for a charge!
Patton stood with his back to the room, hands extended toward the flames, breath fogging the air. Behind him, a man entered carrying ruin. A major from the Inspector General's office stepped forward, visibly uneasy, gripping a thick manila folder stamped top secret. Inside lay sworn testimonies, ballistic analyses, photographs of frozen corpses, and a list of American names. It was a complete investigation, airtight, damning, into a massacre committed not by Germans, but by U.S. soldiers. The major placed the folder on Patton's desk. He expected fury, courts-martial, discipline enforced like a thunderclap. Patton turned slowly. His steel blue eyes moved from the folder to the fire, then back to the major. He did not open the file. He did not ask who was accused. Instead, he picked it up. The major watched in disbelief as the general carried the evidence toward the flames. Patton was not preparing punishment. He was preparing erasure, and the choice he made in the next few seconds would bury the truth for generations. To understand why, one must return to Belgium. December 1944. December 17th, a frozen crossroads near Malmedy. The cold was merciless, the worst in 3 decades. Weapons malfunctioned, skin blackened with frostbite. The Ardennes became a white graveyard, but fear cut deeper than ice. At midday, soldiers of the U.S. 285th Field Artillery Observation Battalion drove straight into the vanguard of Kampfgruppe Piper, an elite Waffen-SS armored unit. Outgunned and surrounded, the Americans surrendered. At first, everything followed the rules. The prisoners were disarmed, assembled in a snow-covered field. 120 men stood with hands raised, breath rising in white clouds. Then the machine guns opened fire. For 10 minutes, the field became a slaughterhouse. 84 American prisoners were murdered. The wounded were executed where they lay. A few survived by pretending to be dead, their uniforms stiffening with frozen blood. When they escaped and reached American lines, their words spread like wildfire. Malmedy. The name became a curse, a warning, a license. Among Patton's men, an unspoken belief hardened. SS troops were not entitled to mercy. Patton himself addressed his officers with chilling clarity. This was no ordinary enemy. This was a force that butchered prisoners. Fire would be answered with fire. His men listened and took him literally. January 1st, 1945. Chinon, Belgium. After savage house-to-house fighting, elements of the U.S. 11th Armored Division secured the village. They captured roughly 60 German soldiers, Waffen-SS, unmistakable in camouflage smocks and runic insignia. They were disarmed. They surrendered. This was not combat. A machine gun was set up in the snow. Ammunition belts were fed carefully. Officers stood by. The order was given. In minutes, 60 prisoners were dead. Those who survived the first burst were finished with rifle fire. Some ran. They were shot from behind. The snow turned red. It was an execution, carried out by young Americans from Ohio, Texas, New York, men who had crossed the Atlantic to liberate Europe. Rumors spread instantly. Civilians had watched. Officers had seen the aftermath. By January 2nd, the Inspector General launched a formal inquiry. Evidence poured in, witness statements, ballistics, photographs, names, charges carrying mandatory death sentences. The implications were unbearable. If prosecuted, the case would explode. Nazi propaganda would weaponize it. America's claim to moral authority would fracture, and Patton's command would stand accused of the very crimes it condemned. On January 4th, the file reached him. The room was silent except for the fire. The major stood rigid, waiting. Patton lifted the folder, weighed it once more, then spoke. There are no murderers in this army. And with a casual flick of the wrist, George S. Patton tossed the entire investigation into the flames. Paper curled. Photographs shriveled. Names vanished. Justice turned to smoke. The major did not protest. He understood. The law had just been suspended by command decision, and the fire kept burning. The major does not move. He stands rigid, trapped between instinct and obligation. This is a man forged by regulations, an officer who built his career inside the Inspector General's office, guarding the rule book like scripture. His purpose has always been clear: ensure the United States Army obeys its own laws. And now, in this silent stone room, he has just watched the most powerful American commander in Europe commit a crime with absolute authority. Obstruction of justice. Destruction of evidence. Accessory after the fact to murder. The fire crackles. The silence presses in. In this moment, the major understands the choice before him. He can speak, destroy his career, invite charges of insubordination, possibly face a court-martial himself. Or he can turn away, walk out, and become part of the lie that has just been sealed in ash. He raises his hand and salutes. It is stiff, automatic, almost lifeless. Patton does not return it right away. His eyes remain fixed on the fireplace, watching the last fragments of paper curl and collapse into blackened flakes. Only when the flames have finished their work does old blood and guts lift his hand in response, slowly, dismissively. That will be all, Major. The major turns and exits, closing the heavy oak door with deliberate care. In the hallway, he presses his back against the cold stone wall. His hands are trembling. He draws a long breath, steadying himself. Outside that chateau, America is fighting for freedom, for democracy, for the rule of law. Inside it, the law has just died in fire. Back in the office, Patton's aide, a young captain who has witnessed everything from the shadows, moves toward the sideboard. He pours a drink, the crystal glass clinking softly in his shaking hand. Sir, the implications are none of your goddamn business, Captain. Patton cuts in. There is no fury in his voice, only finality. Patton takes the glass and walks to the window. Snow drifts down over Luxembourg. Somewhere beyond the hills, the Third Army is preparing to advance. Tanks are being fueled, ammunition loaded. Orders issued. The men of the 11th Armored Division will never know how close they came to ruin, not by German artillery, but by American justice. Patton has saved them. He has chosen his soldiers over the law. But why? Why would a man who demanded ruthless discipline, who court-martialed officers for minor failures, who once struck a shell-shocked soldier for cowardice, protect men who committed execution-style murder? The answer lies in who George S. Patton truly was. He was not a policeman in uniform. He was not a lawyer wrapped in olive drab. Patton was a war prophet. To him, battle was not a legal proceeding. It was a primal contest for survival. The battlefield was not governed by statutes, but by strength, momentum, and fear. In Patton's world, hesitation was fatal. The only unforgivable crime was weakness. He knew the 11th Armored Division would soon be hurled back into combat, against fortified positions, against SS fanatics who offered no mercy. He needed those men savage, aggressive, convinced that their commander would protect them no matter the cost. A court-martial, in his mind, would shatter that belief. It would tell every soldier in the Third Army that dead Germans mattered more than living Americans. That violence carried legal risk. That hesitation might be safer than aggression. Patton could not accept that. He had spent a lifetime preparing for war, studying Alexander, Napoleon, medieval knights. He believed modern armies had been softened by moral abstractions that killed soldiers just as surely as bullets. And after Malmedy, his hatred for the Waffen-SS had hardened into something absolute. They were not soldiers deserving protection. They were predators. In Patton's calculus, erasing the Chenonia massacre was not a crime. It was command. The effects were immediate. No arrests came, no military police, no charges. The investigation vanished as if it had never existed. The men returned to their tanks and half-tracks. Engines roared, columns rolled east. A message spread through the ranks without ever being spoken. The old man has our backs. For the remainder of the campaign, Third Army's fighting was merciless. SS units were rarely captured. Surrendering men were often told to run, and shot as they did. The divisions fought with a ruthless edge, convinced they were untouchable. They were effective. And they were changed. The stain of Chenonia never washed away. It settled into the minds of those who were there, who understood that justice had been reduced to ash in a Luxembourg fireplace. After the war, rumors surfaced. Patton's superiors heard them, and chose not to look too closely. Victory had been achieved. American lives had been saved. That, they decided, was enough. History, written by the victors, reflected what Patton destroyed. Malmedy became infamous. Trials were held. Sentences passed. Nazi barbarity was exposed to the world. Chenonia vanished, whispered only at reunions, spoken softly by men nearing the end of their lives. Decades later, the truth emerged piece by piece. Documents, testimonies, confessions. The paper trail was gone, but memory remained. Today, officers study the incident not as a footnote, but as a question. What would you have done? Patton answered that question on January 4, 1945. He chose his men. He chose victory. He chose war over law. And in doing so, he proved that even legends are forged in compromise, and sometimes in fire.